While I was at the tow company, we had a little bit of difficulty hiring enough drivers to adequately take care of the business, because we had about 2,000 or 3,000 more tows one month than the next. And so one of the things we did was we gave everybody 2 days off on the off months and only 1 day off on the police on months, and then we had no vacations. Ours were the even numbered months, so no vacations during the even numbered months. But still, we would hire drivers, and we find out that experienced drivers have problems. They've learned to do stuff incorrectly, and they can continue to do it incorrectly. And you can talk to them and train them to do it the right way, and when you go out and watch them, and they still doing the bad thing, like they only do one tie down chain. Winch the car up on the bed and put one tie down chain. And then our winches, the winches are made to pull up, but they're not made to lock. They do lock pretty good, but once they start wearing out, then they give a little. So if you pull the car up on the bed and you put one chain in the back, and you have the yoke and the winch on the front, and then you do this and you drive down the road, pretty soon the car's going like this. And one night I got a call, and we had picked up a car on US 95 where a wife had broke down, and her husband called us, and we picked up the car, and he drove out to the scene and picked up the wife, and he was driving behind our tow truck. Well, that started happening. Pretty soon we got enough slack where the hook just dropped on the bed, and then it rolled forward, and the two front hooks dropped off, and the car just rolled off the back of the tow truck, which is about this high, almost hit the car that was following it, which was their car, and went across and hit the guardrail on one side, went across, hit the guardrail on the other side, and it was like a ping pong ball going down the freeway. And I got that call about 3 a.m. It was one of those things, the meat grinder, you know. I had to go and tell the guy, it was a fairly late model car. And luckily it didn't hit them, or he avoided it. But so they wanted the insurance company and all this kind of stuff, and I had to deliver the car to the dealership, and ended up taking them to breakfast and stuff, and schmoozed them and told them we'd take care of it, which we did. And we asked the driver. The driver was a mechanic that worked for us and drove at night, and we thought, man, he would know how to hook up a car if anybody did. But he'd learned to tow somewhere else, and truly, the correct way is to have 4 tie-down points on every car, and the winch does not count as a tie-down point. Federal law says you have to have at least one at the front of the car, one at the back of the car, but the towing company rules is 4. Any towing company training is 4 tie-downs. So we had a big training on how to do it, and we had this extra chains with links that we'd hook up to the cars and stuff. We had this procedure, but in spite of all that, 2 months later, we lost another car off a flatbed in the middle of the night. Luckily, the people weren't following it, but the car was totaled, and we had to pay for that car too. So then we decided to take a new approach. Instead of hiring tow truck drivers that had experience, we would hire inexperienced people and train them to be tow truck drivers. And we would put an ad in the newspaper or the Nifty Nickel mechanic's helper. The jobs for mechanic's helper must have a good driver's license. And people would come and we'd say, you know, we've filled all those mechanic jobs. What experience do you have? And they worked on their own car and they could be a helper. And I kind of evaluate the guy and say, well, have you ever thought about becoming a tow truck driver? Well, I don't know how to drive a tow truck. I said, well, we could pay you we'd train you and we'd pay you what to train. Really? And so a lot of those guys were pretty interested in that. And sometimes drivers get so prissy they won't look underneath the car when they're hooking it up to see what they're hooking to. And front-wheel drive cars were just coming into vogue at that time. And you have a J-hook. And the older cars, you just hook it under the back axle. It's a big old round back axle. And hook it on there, and you can tie it down like that, no big deal. Well, at front-wheel drive, you do that, and you bend a tie rod arm or a strut. And then you bend it like that, and then the back tire goes like this. And people come pick up their car and they'd say, my car is squeaking funny. You go out there and they drive this, hear that noise? This tire is skidding because it's not going straight. And it was obviously the tow truck driver did that. So I'd say, okay, we'll take care of that. And we'd go buy a new strut, fix it for them and stuff. And then we'd hang that on the wall in the garage, that old strut we took off bent, and put the driver's name underneath it. And it was our trophy wall, and this is his trophy. And very few people did it twice. But still, there was that problem of the old. So, how do you train a tow truck driver? We went and I made an outline and a syllabus, and we eventually went to talk to some of the tow companies in our company. We had 34 tow companies at one time, and so I went to Phoenix and I went to California and saw what they did for training, and they have training manuals, and so it took all of that, and I made up a syllabus, day 1, day 2, and day 1 was half paperwork and every one was half inside and half outside. One of the problems I saw in some of the training programs is they had the driver inside and ground him through the lessons, and it was so boring. I almost went to sleep looking at the training. And so I could see that most of the people who would be inclined to drive a tow truck are not really paperwork people. They're not really class learners. Matter of fact, we had a couple of drivers that couldn't even read. We found out later. But they faked it enough to get the job and ended up to be pretty good tow truck drivers. But so day 1 they did this, day 2, and it was a 3-week course. And one of the things I did is we put cars on the lifts. On every car, when they transport a car, on the frame, there is either a round hole or an oblong hole or someplace for the car transporter to hook his chain in. And then he tightens it down and holds the car down. And those are also good tie-down spots when you're towing a car, especially if you put it on the flatbed, and especially if you can't hook it on the axles anymore, or the front axle. You say, well, the front axles have little rubber things, and they put the hooks through the rubber, and CV joints, kind of like mini U joints, they break them, and all kinds of stuff. So we had to teach everybody where the proper place to hook a car was. So I made these little short films where we painted every place on different models of car. There are different places. We painted them white, and then we filmed and had a big stick and said, right there you do it, and then we did it. And we tried to, it was in the early days of movie camera stuff, but we tried to make it a little funny. And then there's certain places to park stuff out in the yard, and we walked out to the yard and showed the movie and where, and then later we took them out there. So then we took 3 cars and put them on their side in our north yard. We didn't take up much room because they were on the side. They were record cars that we owned, and so they could see, just walk right up to it, and they didn't have to look like that up on the lift or anything. They just rock, and that's where you put the chain, and then we give them a cluster hook or a mini J or something, put it in there. And so we had the classroom. We had one classroom teacher, and he would go over the basics, and then each driver had each new driver had an experienced driver that would take them out training after the first week. Then they were in a tow truck, and then usually by the first week we got their driver's license record back and the drug test and all that stuff, so that we could legally have them in the truck. And then at the end of every day, actually we had 50 drivers, and I tried to have five drivers in a squad, and then a squad leader, and that was the trainer. And we didn't always have 10 trainees. We usually had between 5 and 8 trainees, and so not everybody was training all the time. But we paid the trainers an extra $100 a week to be a trainer. And if their driver that they trained stayed with the company for 3 months, they got an extra $250 bonus, because a lot of guys would quit in the first month or 2. But if they had someone that they could call, or they could talk to on the radio, that would help them out when they get in a pickle or something. We found some trainers would go to the tow site and help walk the guy through of his guys. And at the end of every day, the trainer would turn in a sheet of paper, just a little form, on how the trainee did that day. And the teacher, quote unquote, in the classroom stuff from the first week, he would turn in what his opinion of. And that was okay, except that I talked to some of the trainees, and some of them were not very complimentary about their trainers. So then I had a form for them to fill out, a little half sheet of paper, on how they thought the trainer did. And we changed some trainers around a little bit. Some of them didn't think of it as a privilege. They thought it was extra work. And so pretty soon we had some pretty good trainers. And after the fellow, at the end of 3 weeks, then they would take a test. We'd put them in a tow truck, a wheel lift tow truck, and have them back into space and hook it up, and put a hook up onto a flatbed and drop it off and drive around and take a drive around the neighborhood. And it was quite an inclusive test. And they had to pass that, and most of them passed that. A couple of them worked a couple more days, and then they did it. We had a paperwork. One thing we had to do, you had to fill out the forms when you tow the car. You had to put the VIN number down, the license plate number down, the name, the addresses where you picked it up and where you took it to, and the odometers of the tow truck when you first got there, when you picked it up to tow, when you stopped towing. And so the forms were fairly complicated, so we had a packet. We gave them all of them of sample forms, and then they would fill out forms. The first week they were in training, a couple of days they would fill out the forms, and then they'd just drive. And the last week, the trainer did all the driving, all the hooking up, and the trainee. And all the trainer would do was give them advice and stuff. And maybe if you're working one side of the truck, you work the other and hook up the chain and stuff. So it turned out that we had a lot of drivers that were trained very similarly, and sometimes when there was a lot of tows to be done in a certain area, we'd send 2 or 3 flatbed trucks out, and I'd go out to kind of see what was going on, and it was almost like they were dancing. They were all coordinated because they had all been taught the same moves. I mean, they walk back, and this is what you do first. And so one guy and 2 flatbed drivers would work together. They would load the cars on his truck, then they'd load the cars on that truck. And when you get putting a car on the stinger, you cross the chains, because when you go around a corner, if you lose a chain, then they'll keep, and if you get them like this, then one gets longer. And so they take the safety chains out of the back and slide them to each other, crisscross. It was kind of like the ballet. I mean, tow truck ballet or whatever. But it was really quite a good experience. And sometimes if drivers had accidents, or they didn't turn their money in, or they wouldn't come to work, or something happened, we had to have to lose them. Then if they had worked for quality, then they were very much in desire for the other tow companies in town. They all liked them, how we trained the guys. So we had quite a good experience training drivers, and you know, we didn't put up with any business, any funny business. You know, you could not turn down a tow. If you called to go on a tow, you had to go. The only thing you could turn it down for is if you said, "Hey, I've been behind the wheel too long. I'll be tired. I won't be safe." And then, boom, you're out of the truck for 10 hours right then. But otherwise, you can't say, "Well, I just ordered dinner," or "I didn't get my hamburger yet," or "Do you know where that is?" All the time, guys were saying, "Do you know where that is? That's clear across town. I'll never make it there. It'll take 20 minutes to get there." And then every time we had the meetings, people would say, "You know, I'm not getting enough tows." So I'd have a dispatcher come in, and I'd brief him ahead of time. And I'd say, "Well, let's ask the dispatcher what kind of drivers he sends most of the tows to." And the dispatcher would say, "I like the driver that when I assign them a tow, they say, 10-4, I'm on it," and they go on the tow. Not that I have to go to the bathroom. Do you know where that is? I don't give those drivers tows unless I absolutely have to. And I said, "Well, there you go. You can get right up and do the work, be pleasant, and you get the tows. And if you buy hamburgers for the dispatchers, or ice cream or milkshakes, maybe you might get an extra tow for that. But really, they like the guys that get the job done, because they have a lot of pressure to get those tows accomplished. The police are calling back saying, 'Where's your truck?'" So we had a good time, and finally we got pretty organized. Even after they all passed the drug test, we pre-tested them, did the other tests, and it improved our drivers quite a bit.
I didn't realize you're running a driving school as well as a tow company.